Let us ask you something. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about basketball? Is it the flashy dunks, or maybe it is the packed arenas going absolutely wild over players? But if you really think about it, what makes basketball unforgettable are the rivalries. The clashes between players and teams that feel bigger than the game itself. These rivalries are what keep us fans glued to the screen. So today, let's take a trip down the memory lane and talk about the greatest rivalries in basketball history. Continue watching to hear the stories that not only shaped the league, but also gave us those "I'll never forget where I was" moments. Why rivalries just hit different. Before talking about the most famous basketball rivalry of all time, let's talk about why rivalries are so important. Think about it. In a sport full of superstars, what happens when the biggest names go head to head? That's when things get personal. Rivalries aren't just about winning or losing, they are about pride and legacy. Would Magic Johnson be the legend he is without Larry Bird pushing him to be better? Would LeBron's championship runs feel as epic if Steph Curry wasn't on the other side? Rivalries push players to levels they never thought possible. And for us fans, they make the game feel personal. You're either all in for your guy, or you're rooting hard against the other. No in between. Magic versus Bird, the rivalry that saved the NBA. Let's start with the one that literally put the NBA back on the map, Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird. Their story didn't start in the pros, but in college with the 1979 NCAA championship. Magic's Michigan State beat Bird's Indiana State, and that game was just the beginning of a decade-long saga. Fast forward to the 1980s. Bird's Celtics were all grit and old-school toughness, a perfect contrast to Magic's flashy, fast-paced Showtime Lakers. They met 3 times in the finals, and every single one of those series felt like a cultural event. Bird was the blue-collar guy who would bury a jumper and then tell you exactly how he did it. Magic was pure charisma. Their rivalry was a huge reason the NBA went from a struggling league to a global powerhouse. And you know the best part about it? After all that fire on the court, they ended up becoming good friends. Celtics versus Lakers, the forever war. Now you can't talk about Bird and Magic without talking about the bigger picture. Celtics versus Lakers. This isn't just a rivalry, it's the rivalry in basketball history. It goes way back to the 1960s with Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. The Celtics were all about teamwork, while the Lakers were defined by their superstar style. Every era since has had its own chapter in this story. In the 80s, it was Magic versus Bird. In the 2000s, it was Kobe Bryant versus Paul Pierce. They've faced off in the finals a ridiculous 12 times. That's more than any other 2 teams, and it speaks to how deep the history runs. It's East Coast versus West Coast, tradition versus Hollywood. Every time they play, you can feel the history on the court. The Bulls versus the Bad Boys, a real grudge match. Next, we have a rivalry that wasn't about mutual respect, it was about bruises. We're talking about Michael Jordan versus Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons. The late 80s were brutal. Detroit's bad boys had one goal: stop Jordan. They even had something called the Jordan rules, which basically meant you knock him down whenever he drove to the basket hard. For 3 years in a row, the Pistons sent Jordan and the Bulls home. This physical punishment lit a fire under Jordan like nothing else. He hit the gym, bulked up, and finally in 1991, the Bulls swept them. You know what's the cherry on top? The Pistons walked off the court without shaking hands. That rivalry left scars that lasted for decades, but it's also what turned Jordan into the unstoppable force we know him as today. LeBron versus Curry, the modern day clash. For the next rivalry, we have to fast forward to the 2010s. If you watched basketball, you know this one. LeBron James versus Stephen Curry. From 2015 to 2018, the Cavs and the Warriors faced off in the finals 4 straight times. That's almost unheard of. It was a clash of legacies. LeBron, the king, carrying teams on his back with sheer power and leadership. Curry, the baby-faced assassin, completely changing the game with his mind-blowing three-point shooting. Their rivalry wasn't built on bad blood, but on 2 icons clashing to see who would define their era. The 2016 finals, when LeBron led Cleveland back from a 3-1 deficit to beat the 73-win Warriors, is one of the most incredible moments in sports history. Even now, when they share the court, you can feel that tension. You know you're watching 2 all-time greats. The Rockets versus the Warriors, the ultimate challenge. Lastly, we have a rivalry that felt like a movie. The Houston Rockets versus the Golden State Warriors was less about a long history and more about one team being built for a single purpose, taking down the greatest dynasty. In 2018, the Warriors were a seemingly unbeatable force, but the Rockets, led by James Harden and Chris Paul, put together a roster and a game plan specifically to beat them. The Western Conference Finals that year was pure drama. The Rockets had the Warriors on the ropes, up 3-2, but in a moment of heartbreaking sports agony, Chris Paul went down with an injury in Game 5. Then in Game 7, with a trip to the finals on the line, the Rockets went ice cold and famously missed an incredible 27 three-pointers in a row. It was a gut-wrenching end to a rivalry that was about a team with a perfect plan and a historic shot at glory that just slipped through their fingers. Kevin Durant later admitted that for the Warriors, that Houston series really was the finals for us. Why rivalries make the game great? So what does it all mean? It means greatness doesn't happen in a vacuum. Magic needed Bird, Jordan needed the Pistons, LeBron needed Curry. Rivalries bring out the best in players because the stakes are so high. And for us fans, they give us the stories we love, the heroes, the villains, the moments we'll never forget. Because at the end of the day, basketball without rivalries would just be a game, but with them, it's emotion. It's the reason we're still talking about these epic battles. Alright, that's our look back at the biggest rivalries in basketball history. But now we want to hear from you. Which of these rivalries do you think had the biggest impact on the game, and why? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, hit that like button, subscribe for more sports news, and share this with a friend who loves a good debate.